Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Most Accurate Podcast. I am your host, Addison Hayes, joined, as always, by one of the most accurate rankers and projectors in all of the fantasy football community and industry, John Paulson. John, we have football tonight. How are we feeling?
Feeling good, and I believe this is our first Sneaky Starts dedicated podcast, video, whatever you want to call it. Excited to talk some Sneaky Starts on Thursdays this season. It's going to be fun.
Yep. So we are recording on Thursdays. For those of you watching or listening, you see this on Friday, so we have no idea what happened tonight for the Eagles-Cowboys game, but hopefully it was a phenomenal game. Great way to kick off the season. But we're going to talk through some sneaky starts. If you're not familiar, John does an article for this every single week on 4 for 4. But we wanted to do this in a video format to also just run through, a couple players at each position, not giving away all of John's article. But we each came together and we each have a pick for each of the 4 positions. So 8 total players that are sneaky starts for week 1. And it might sound a little bit weird because week 1, mostly everybody's healthy. Depending on where you drafted some of these guys, you might have better options at each position, but we wanted to give you guys some options for, possible high upside plays, or if you are in a pinch or anything like that for this first week of the NFL season. So, John, at the quarterback position, who is your week 1 sneaky start?
Yeah, so just a little background on Sneaky Starts. Started writing this article years and years ago. It's often imitated, and imitation is a sincerest form of flattery, but sneaky start, I also get pushback because so-and-so is not sneaky enough, or this is not sneaky. A sneaky start is just somebody that is ranked higher than they normally would be based on either injuries, matchup, something going on with the team. So, and it can range from anywhere from a well-known player down to somebody that nobody knows or very few people know. So I write for a wide audience, and I just wanted to get that off my chest so we don't get flamed in the comments about somebody not being sneaky enough. I don't want to hear it. My quarterback pick this week is Trevor Lawrence. Now he's, QB 20 off the board in drafts, something like that. People are drafting him as a backup, typically not expecting to start him, but in week 1, you can start him against Carolina due to the matchup with the Panthers. Now the Panthers did invest into their defense, but they were awful last year. They allowed 31.4 real world points per game, which was the most in the league by a fairly wide margin. They also gave up the most passing touchdowns last year, 35. Normally Lawrence, who does run a little bit, will sit on the quarterback 2 kind of fringe. Maybe with this matchup elevates him into QB1 territory.
I like it a lot. This I saw a tweet earlier this week that was essentially the 4 bottom teams from last year in terms of passing yards allowed at the quarterback position are all playing each other. So it's the Panthers and the Jaguars, and then it is the Buccaneers and the Falcons are the 2 very interesting matchups that I think a lot of fantasy managers are going to want to try to attack, because there's a lot of very good fantasy assets on both teams offensively. Then if they're playing really poor defenses, that just makes it even better. It makes these guys even more interesting when they are on the fringe, like what you said with Trevor Lawrence. So I really like that call. And I'm going to be going with that other matchup, the Tampa Bay Atlanta matchup. And I am identifying Michael Penix here. The Buccaneers were bottom 3 in fantasy points per game allowed versus quarterbacks last year. They were bottom 3 in passing yards allowed, and they were bottom 12 in passing touchdowns allowed. I think this game, just as the 2 games that we saw last year between these 2 teams, could turn into a shootout very, very quickly. The winning team for both teams last year, it was required for them to score at least 30 points in that game to win the game. So if we're going to see something very similar this year, that could be a good thing for everybody involved, but especially the quarterback for Atlanta in Michael Penix. Kirk Cousins last year in both games against the Buccaneers threw for 276 and 4 in one game, and then had the 500-yard and 4 touchdown game. It was like week 4, week 5 last year. That's what Kirk Cousins did last year. Michael Penix might be a better quarterback. Has Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson out of the backfield, and we'll see what else he can get done. Vita Vea also, I saw, is did not practice on Wednesday with a foot injury. He popped up pretty late on injury reports this week for the Buccaneers defense. So if Vita Vea doesn't play, it feels like that makes things a little bit easier for Michael Penix if he's not getting massive amounts of pressure just in his face up the middle all the time.
So would you start him over like a Russell Wilson, Sam Darnold, Matthew Stafford, Tua Tagovailoa, Geno Smith, Jared Goff? Start him all over all those guys?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. All right.
You're not feeling it?
No, I'm just wondering. I don't have him ranked that high. That matchup looks good though. But Penix is kind of a mystery box for me right now. But I think he probably should be higher than where I have him right now in the weekly rankings.
I don't love that he doesn't offer rushing upside.
Right.
That's one thing that I would like whenever I'm kind of digging a little bit deeper at the quarterback position. But I think he can get there through the air against a really bad passing defense and having, obviously an elite weapon in Drake London, elite weapon in Bijan Robinson out of the backfield. And if this game gets, like I said, really high scoring really quickly, it's not unlikely for Penix to throw for 3 or 4 touchdowns this week. Tight end position at the other onesie position, then John, who are we looking at as a sneaky start this week at the tight end position?
Yeah, I've been plugging Hunter Henry as the final decent option at tight end in draft season. Like if you miss out on George Kittle and then you miss out on Tucker Kraft or Tyler Warren and you're really down bad at tight end in the draft, Hunter Henry was somebody available very late who offered the tight end 12 numbers last year. He's playing in an ascending offense with Drake May at quarterback. There is a bit more competition for targets with Stephon Diggs there as well, but I'm not too worried about Henry. I think he'll be safe underneath option for Drake May. Had 674 yards, 66 catches last year on 88 targets. The Raiders defense last year gave up the second most fantasy points to the position. So I feel like he's a rock solid streaming option for week 1.
I think Hunter Henry has been a pretty dominant week 1 performer, or early season performer, I should say. Maybe not week 1 specifically, but early season. And for sure, as the veteran presence for Drake May. I was tempted to put Drake May as a sneaky start for quarterback because of the matchup and his rushing ability. But I also think it does well with Hunter Henry. I've been back and forth between him and David Njoku for my DraftKings lineup this week. Njoku's obviously like $700 or $800 more expensive, so I've been trying to weigh out if he's worth that extra money that I could be spending elsewhere, or if I just want to go down to Hunter Henry. I do currently have Hunter Henry in my DraftKings lineup. So we'll see if I switch off of that, but it's for all the reasons that you just laid out. And I think he's a very, very good and underrated start for week 1 this week. My sneaky start for the tight end position is Brenton Strange. So pairing onto your Trevor Lawrence sneaky start at the quarterback position, I'm looking at his new starting tight end after the departure of Evan Ingram. Panthers were 6th worst against the tight end position last year in fantasy points per game. And in the 8 games that Brenton Strange played without Evan Ingram last year, he averaged over 8 PPR points per game, and he either scored a touchdown or eclipsed 60 receiving yards in 5 out of 8 games. So you're essentially getting at least 6 or 7 fantasy points as a floor when you incorporate those receptions in a half or a full PPR format. I also, like to think that maybe Travis Hunter maybe is a little bit slower to integrate fully into this full-time offensive role, or at least playing on both sides. I'm not really sure what that's going to look like in week 1 and how aggressive Liam Cohen wants to be with Travis Hunter snaps on both sides of the ball. So if Travis Hunter does take a little bit to integrate or is not integrated fully this week, we could see Brenton Strange as the kind of go-to number 2 option for Trevor Lawrence behind Brian Thomas Jr. against a bad Panthers defense.
I like it. I have Brenton Strange in sneaky starts as well. 26 total players in the sneaky starts this week with 8 prop bets or prop plays. I am not a tout, but I thought let's try it for week 1. If I crash and burn, maybe I won't be offering prop plays, but there's just quite a few overs, and it's all overs in this one because sneaky starts is about being optimistic about players and them playing in roles that are larger than what the books would say or what fantasy community thinks. But I like the Brenton Strange call. Carolina was 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends last year.
Very bad defense. We want to attack solid options on offense against bad defenses. Speaking of which, that might be like the perfect segue into our running back sneaky starts here, because I cannot think of a more mediocre offensive player playing in a more optimal defensive matchup than your pick here for the running back position?
Well, I think Jerome Ford's family would take issue with you calling him mediocre. He did average 5.3 something yards per carry last year, which is elite. I don't know that he's elite, but that was elite for rushing efficiency for Jerome Ford last year. Reports out of Cleveland, Mary Kay Cabot, who has been hit or miss over the years in terms of her fantasy or work load. Reporting did report that he's going to be the workhorse with Dylan Sampson in a change of pace type role, backup role. Quinshon Judkins is still unsigned, so we are going to get a few weeks, it looks like, of Jerome Ford as the lead back. In 6 games without Nick Chubb last year, he averaged 14 touches, 78 total yards, 0.33 touchdowns. You have a pretty good matchup against the Bengals, who were sort of middling against the run last year. This should be a high-scoring game, at least on the Bengals side. If the Browns can keep up, you're going to see some rushing touchdowns for them, and maybe Ford gets one.
I'm also thinking that maybe Ford gets a little bit of the receiving work as well in that kind of need to throw situation for Cleveland to try to keep up with Cincinnati. And I mean, all I needed to see to verify that Cincy's defense was going to be bad was that the Commanders defense just like ran for, I think it was like 20 yards a carry in their preseason game. So that's pretty much all I needed to know and see already to just verify that this defense is going to be one that we want to attack for running backs, no matter who the running back is. So Jerome Ford is in a great situation this week to highly exceed expectations for week 1. Now, my running back sneaky start this week is Austin Ekeler, who draws a matchup against the New York Giants this week. In 3 games without Brian Robinson last year, Ekeler averaged 15.5 PPR points per game. That's an average of about 14 touches for 70 yards and 1 touchdown per game. He gets a Giants defense that was 5th worst against running backs last year for fantasy, and we're also bottom 7 in receiving yards allowed to the running back position, a specialty that we know is Austin Ekeler's. I do like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt a lot for season-long upside as the potential guy to take over more of the complete backfield role, kind of like what we saw with Brian Robinson last year. And Ekeler still plays this kind of change of pace / receiving back throughout the rest of the year. But I think this is Eckler's backfield to start the year. It seems like there's been every indication out of Washington that since they traded away Brian Robinson, that Austin Ekeler will be their guy to at least initially start the year. So I really like playing Austin Ekeler this week. And I like him for a rusher and a receiver that I think he's a little bit underrated as the starting running back in Washington.
I agree. I had him in sneaky starts right below Jerome Ford as well, and completely agree with the take that Ekeler probably, especially a healthy Ekeler to start the season, sees the lion's share of these touches, and he can do a lot of damage and like 13 to 15 touches per game.
I just want to point out that I did not read your article yet before recording this, so
it would
I'm just coming up on these on my own.
It would save you time in researching if you had with those last 2 picks, but it's totally fine. Eckler's a good sneaky start.
All right, at the wide receiver position, our last position to kind of run through here before we get to some prop plays for today's video. Some of it off of what we've already been talking about. But John, at the wide receiver position, who are we looking at as a very sneaky start?
Cedric Tillman. Been touting Tillman in draft. He's being drafted as a wide receiver 6, and for most of draft season, I had him ranked as a low end wide receiver 4, high end wide receiver 5. After the Amari Cooper trade, he was basically on fire. 8 for 81 on 12 targets against Cincy, 7 for 99 and 2 touchdowns on 9 targets against Baltimore. 6 for 75 and a touchdown, 11 targets against the Chargers. And then he had kind of a quiet game, but still managed 3 for 47 on 8 targets against New Orleans. The workload there is what kind of pointing out 12, 9, 11, and 8 targets. I know it was a different quarterback, but Joe Flacco and Jameis Winston have a lot of similarities when it comes to supporting fantasy receivers, and reportedly the Flacco-Tillman connection was pretty good in the summer and training camp. Tillman was the wide receiver 8 in that span. and he's being ranked really low in the consensus, and I think he's a really strong start this week.
In that aforementioned DraftKings lineup with Hunter Henry, I have Cedric Tillman as a nice salary cap saver to allow me to spend up at some other positions. So I really, really like this call. I think he's going to be, like we said, like go up against this Bengals defense, play as many people as you can that are relevant and could see a very nice workload. That to me is Cedric Tillman, even with a healthy Jerry Jeudy. They're doing very similar things last year, as you already mentioned. So why not just take the cheaper guy, or why not think that Cedric Tillman could be just as good or maybe even better than Jerry Jeudy with Joe Flacco? Now, my wide receiver sneaky start is Xavier Legette versus Jacksonville. This is kind of like a riser over the past few days, basically ever since the news of Jalen Coker's quad injury that has landed him on the injured reserve for at least a month. Obviously, Adam Thielen also got traded away from Carolina back to Minnesota. So now with those two receivers out of the mix, this is basically Tet McMillan and Xavier Legette. And, they have Hunter Renfrow there in the slot. They got David Moore is still there, who had some good performances last year without Deontay Johnson, but he doesn't really factor in much compared to Legette and Tet McMillan. So this offense is basically those two wide receivers, and they're playing against a really bad Jacksonville Jaguars defense. As I mentioned already, they were one of the bottom 4 teams in passing yards allowed. They were really bad against wide receivers for fantasy points. And I think Legette may honestly benefit from being more of the number 2 in this offense. I kind of compare it and see it similar to a Chris Godwin role across from Mike Evans, where Tet McMillan is much more of the Mike Evans type of wide receiver, and Legette can be kind of that big slot or that possession receiver who then can break tackles and do some damage after the fact with the ball in his hands. So Legette's floor last year is basically around like 4 for 50. Maybe he scored a touchdown every other week or so. And that was in last year's offense. So if Carolina is any better to start the year, especially without the other wide receivers there to steal targets away, I think Legette could be a very sneaky play this week as the Panthers wide receiver too.
I have Tet McMillan in the article. I do not have Legette in this one this week. I think he was a little too down the rankings for me, but I could see the argument you're making. His floor was more like 30 yards. He had 3 games after he started starting under 10 yards. It's terrifying, but he did have a run where he had 5 touchdowns in 7 games or something like that. And you make some good points about the how they're down bad at receiver. Ja'Tavion Sanders is also an interesting play that I'm not 100% convinced that he's still ahead of Tommy Tremble, with Tremble coming back from that back injury.
Yeah, JT Sanders was on my short list to be my tight end sneaky start, but I agree with you. I don't know where we're at with Tommy Tremble. And I didn't see enough from JT Sanders compared to Brenton Strange last year. But I do like JT Sanders as a potential stash. In dynasty leagues, he's been a good stash. In deeper keeper leagues or redraft leagues, I think he's a solid stash just to see what happens, or at least a name to keep an eye on your waiver wire over the next couple of weeks if he does start to pop. Now, our last little segment for today is talking through some player props over on the new Bleacher Nation Fantasy app. They have a new picks game, very similar to a Prize Picks or an Underdog, where all you do is just go through every single game. We got every single player in there with their yards, their touchdowns, or receptions, or whatever it is, and you just say more or less than whatever that prop is. Fill out your card. You get a payout multiplier at the end based on how many plays that you have in there. And that is Bleacher Nation Fantasy's new picks game. As of right now, they are running a promotion where you can sign up, get a 50% deposit match for up to $100. So if you deposit $200, you get $100 back in free bonus cash to play with through the Bleacher Nation Fantasy app. So you can download that through the Google Play or the iOS App Store, sign up, get that deposit match, and start winning some money here for week 1. I actually went through, and if you play all 8 players that we mentioned today, just put their over on their yards. So Trevor Lawrence over, Michael Penix over. Some of these guys feel like they're really low in their props. Hunter Henry, I think, was like in the 30s for receiving yards. Ford was in the 40s. Ekeler was in the low 20s for rushing and receiving yards. Tillman, I think, was at 40. Legette was in the 30s somewhere. So if you believe in all 8 of these plays actually hitting, you would actually 100x your entry through the Bleacher Nation fantasy app for all 8 of our plays. So $1 turning into $100, or would that be $10 turning into a thousand? I guess. So that's the math on 100x. So if you believe that strongly in all 8 guys that we just mentioned, it would 100x your entry on Bleacher Nation fantasy. Now, outside of that, we each have a play to give you for a separate card that has our own props that we didn't already mention. So, John, do you have your first leg that you want to throw at for this Bleacher Nation fantasy card for week 1?
I do, and I this one's actually kind of a correlated play. At other pick'em sites, they might reduce your odds on them, but at Bleacher Nation, it's a 3 to 1. So I'm going with Joe Flacco over 240.5 passing yards in his last 11 starts for the Colts last year and the Browns in 2023. He has averaged 292 passing yards per game. He's gone over this number in 9 of 11 games. Both times he didn't go over the number. They were road games for the Colts last year. It was at Tennessee and then at Minnesota. This game, if I'm not mistaken, is at Cleveland. So I feel like pretty confident that with the Bengals offense that the Browns are going to have to throw the ball quite a bit. You could also look at his completions number as well at Bleacher Nation. Not as quite as confident in that one, but over 240 for Flacco, and then correlated over 40.5 for Tillman. He is going to be a full-time player. As I mentioned, the Flacco-Tillman connection has been pretty good in camp. And he has cleared this in all 4 of his non-injury games once Amari Cooper was traded last year. Even in his bad game, he had 47 yards on 3 catches before suffering a concussion late last year. So I would go with Flacco and Tillman in a correlated play. Maybe add in the free square. I believe there's a $10 free square with Saquon Barkley's half yard over, and get yourself a 6-to-1 payout on a $10 bet.
My leg for this that you can add into Paulson's 2 legs, so you can make it a 3-leg card for a 6x payout, just if you wanted to play the Sunday games, if you missed the Saquon free square on Thursday night. Mine is Chuba Hubbard over 60.5 rushing yards. He hit this in 9 out of 15 games last year. And then also had another couple games where he was in like the mid-50s. He had 58 against Kansas City's really good rush defense, 56 against Denver's really good rush defense, and then 52 against Washington last year. So he was up in there. He was either over in 9 games or up in the mid to high 50s in double-digit games last year. They play a Jacksonville Jaguars rush defense that is really bad. And in that game, it could be a pretty neutral or maybe even positive game script if Carolina is a little bit better than projected. I did also notice that Graham Barfield tweeted out that over the past 4 seasons, 42% of favorites have covered the spread. And the Jaguars are 3.5-point favorites in this game. So 40% chance historically over the last few years that they even cover that or might not even win straight up, because we're potentially kind of bad at projecting week 1 lines and over-unders. Ryan Heath then took that stat from Graham and then said it's worth thinking about game scripts on the opposite sides of week 1 spreads. Per fantasy points data, Chuba Hubbard averages 100 rushing yards per game in wins since 2023, which trails only Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. So they might not want to use Chuba as much this year with the addition of Rico Dowdle and Trevor Etienne, but man, this feels like a pretty smash opportunity against a bad rush defense. That even if he's not getting 20 plus carries, he can still get there if he has 15, 16, 17 carries or whatever, and get into the 60s for rushing yards. So like I said, you can add that to Paulson's 2 plays of Flacco's passing yards and Tillman's receiving yards. You get a 6x payout for those 3 plays, and to go along with your 50% deposit match for the week. Then you can just basically start off the year with I honestly free money from the deposit match, but then also this play feels kind of free. So you get free money from actually hitting on this play too.
Now you've cursed it. You cursed the play by saying
I
it
did.
feels like free money. Jacksonville 8th in rushing yards allowed last year, and they were up there in carries as well allowed. 3rd in rushing carries against. So Jacksonville definitely a good defense to target for an opposing running back.
So that will do it for today's episode of the Most Accurate Podcast. Week 1 sneaky starts. We will be doing this every single week, except for next week. Paulson's gone. He's going to Lambeau for the Thursday night game in week 2. So maybe I'll just do this by myself, or we'll see what happens. But anyway, from week 3 on for the remainder of the year, we will be back at you with this same video style and format every single week. We appreciate you guys tuning in and checking us out. Please hit a like or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on, whether you're on the new 4for4 YouTube channel or listening to podcasts on Spotify or Apple or wherever it is. A like and subscribe would go a long way in supporting this podcast. We appreciate you guys so much. Enjoy the first week of NFL football. I hope all of your fantasy football teams win, and we will catch you guys next week in week 2 on the Most Accurate Podcasts. Peace.